I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money. This is how. What exactly does an independent film producer do? Well, pretty much everything. When it comes to jobs in filmmaking, I don't think there's a more nebulous one than producing. Wikipedia defines a producer as a person who oversees film production, either employed by a production company or working independently. Producers plan and coordinate various aspects of film production, such as selecting the script, coordinating writing, directing, editing, and arranging financing. Okay, but what about an associate producer or a co-producer? And what about an executive producer? I've produced over 60 feature films as of this recording. And the producer titles have had different meanings on almost every project. It's just complicated. So this is how I see it, generally speaking. A producer is the person who puts the movie together. They're the bridge between the creative, the director, and the business, the money. They're responsible in general for putting everything together. The production crew, the post-production crew, the distribution team. Now, oftentimes on indies, a director will help shoulder many of these things, but it's really the producer's job, at least in my opinion. And then as budgets get higher, these jobs become more compartmentalized. What about an executive producer? In studio terms, an executive producer is basically the producer in charge. They make sure that the other producers are fulfilling their tasks. But I don't think this definition really holds as much once you get out of like the studio level. I think as more and more indie productions have popped up that this role is changing and has really become more of the producer job. For me, an executive producer is responsible for the money, period. Raising the money, finding the money, materializing the money. Now, this is the most simplistic definition, but to my way of thinking, especially in regards to very independent films, this is the main thing. Executive producer equals money. On most of my productions, I credit those bringing in the money as executive producers. Let's move on to what are probably the two most fluid producer titles, the co-producer and the associate producer. A co-producer, to me, this is someone who brings in one or more substantial, substantive elements into the production. Substantive is the key word, but not really enough to be the main producer or the executive producer. They might end up bringing in some of the money, like 10% or 20%, but not enough of the budget to incur the executive producer credit. For me, that has to be like over 50% or over 50% of the money raised. Or a co-producer might bring in like a single name actor or a certain like in-demand crew member or a hard to get location that either the producer or the executive producer couldn't. For example, on Monsters in the Woods, one of the actors that was working on the movie, he was friends with Glenn Plummer. We wanted Glenn Plummer in the movie. So this guy just gave Glenn Plummer a call and Glenn Plummer was in the movie. So for that, we gave this other actor a co-producer credit and an applicable back end. Then there's the black sheep of the producer titles, the associate producer. An associate producer credit, especially on indies, is usually the lowest rung producer. Often so much so that it's basically become a vanity credit that regular producers give out in lieu of actual pay or back end. Now, this is less and less true as budgets go up, and apologies to any associate producers out there that are doing real work on the movies, but I feel especially in the very low budget independent world, it's predominantly the case that it's a vanity credit. Crowdfunding campaigns in particular give this one out like candy, so much so that it's really lost its value in the past 10 years. At least that's my take on it. And I think those are some pretty good definitions. But all that said, if you were to ask a dozen different filmmakers what a producer does, you'd most likely get a dozen very different answers, which is exactly what I did. So let's see what some other filmmakers have to say. If it's a low budget, micro budget, or no budget indie, a producer does everything. From location scouting, casting, setting up catering, contracts, getting insurance, getting permits, scheduling, working one-on-one with the director, acting as an AD, wardrobe, art department, makeup, and more. Basically wearing as many hats as possible with the director. Yeah, The job definitely morphs along with the budget level. He parks his car in the shot because he's a bigwig, and then he yells at anyone else for being parked within a mile of the set, then disappears during actual filming, so you have to digital the car out later. I think I may have worked with that cat. Problem solver! True dat. Wow, tough question to narrow down. Producer is a title that covers a wide range of jobs and responsibilities. An investor, someone responsible for the finances, someone who coordinates and orchestrates the whole film project, and there are more. On my film, the investor was the executive producer who had final approval of the film. I chose the title creative producer since I did everything else. You know, and that's the thing too, like especially on independent films, like 9 times out of 10, you know, it's either the director or the man producer or the guy raising money that decides what producer's what. And a lot of times it's arbitrary. Creative producer, I mean, that's cool. I've heard people refer to creative producers, but I don't think I've ever seen it listed like that in the credits. But again, there's no wrong way to do it. A manager, not an investor. The producer actually makes things happen. You might have the best cinematographer, a great script, improved direction skills, but if you can't afford it financially, pay salaries, budget, props, rent equipment, just go write a novel. Okay. Google definition, producer. See, the way that I get these responses is I go into Facebook groups or Reddit threads and ask simple questions like, look, I know it's a complex issue, but in your opinion, what do producers do? What is a producer? And sometimes I get jerk responses like this, and honestly, it shouldn't, but it pisses me off. And as far as this one, I've produced many feature films, and I have yet to see 2 other professional producers within my career define these titles in the same way. And also, of course, there are many different types of producers, associates, executives, co-producers, line producers. It's hardly a simple, like, Google it question. But thanks for the glib response, asshole. If there's one thing the world needs more of, it's glibness. Either the person who pays for everything, or the leader of the production who gets everything done, like an event planner for a movie. Event planner for a movie. I like that. A producer gives a film team the tools to be successful. That's a pretty good answer.
To me, it's being everything from the metaphorical lymphatic system to the meat, tendons, and ligaments. All the stuff that makes the body work that's under the surface. Usually compared them to the organs that don't get enough credit. IMO.
It's very descriptive. Everything if you're an indie. Nothing if you're a Hollywood. For sure. The responsibilities for almost any position increase exponentially on indies, and it's especially true of producers. There are many types of producers. Yes, there certainly are. This response kind of reminds me of the King Shark hand moment in the Suicide Squad.
A producer is a problem solver. A producer wrangles things together. A producer is there to assist in the business problem solving. A producer is there to get contracts in order, legal pieces handled, etc. A producer working with the director, they team to stay on budget. After the film is done, the producer is there to keep moving. A project for a producer can last a very long time. That's how I think of it anyway. My project, I wrote, directed, I was the producer.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for the great responses here. But let me know what you think a producer's role is. Feel free to sound off in the comments. But whatever you do, keep making movies.